Joining as the Provo Municipal Council. This is the work meeting, 1:30 p.m. Tuesday on January 31st, 2023. Right now we have Shannon Ellsworth on Zoom, and we have Dave Shipley, George Hanley, Rachel Whipple, and myself, Catrice McKay, in the council chambers. And we'll have Justin Harrison give us a prayer, please.
Our dear Father in heaven, we're thankful for this opportunity we have to gather to discuss the affairs of Provo City. Bless that we can have the Spirit be with us, that we can think about and discuss those things that are going on in our city, that we may make this a better place for all citizens of Provo. We're thankful for this building we have to meet in, and we ask for these things in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Justin. Although this is a public meeting, only the presenters and those invited by the council may speak or ask questions, unless otherwise invited by the chair. Please wait to speak until called on by the council chair. Our first item of business, a resolution appropriating $33,829 in the Economic Development Division in the General Fund for a sales tax increment post-performance payment to the shops of Riverwoods. And this will be presented by Keith Morley, the Assistant Director of Development Services.
Hi, good afternoon. These are fun to come talk to you about because I think they're both a reflection of how well some of our retail establishments and centers are doing in Provo City. And I misheard you. Did you read East Bay first or Riverwoods first?
Riverwoods.
So the Riverwoods agreement we put in place a couple of years ago, kind of right in the middle of COVID, that deal had kind of been structured. Dixon Homes did a lot of that work, but we didn't get it finalized, partially because of COVID, some of the things that they were doing until a couple of years ago, but it was right in COVID. And so they had asked that we not start the actual reimbursement agreement until things kind of settle down. And so we agreed to do that and felt like it was still in line with the agreement that we had with them. But since then, we've had a full year worth of tax increment that we've been able to evaluate. And because of that, the portion of the reimbursement that they're entitled to for this year is the $33,829. And to me, that's just a reflection of how things are going out there. That site continues to kind of reinvent itself. And I think they're still working on that. There's still a lot of conversations about what some of the retail mix could look like in the future out there and types of events that they could do. The one thing that impresses me a lot about Riverwoods is how they engage the public and try to create other reasons for them to come out there, which I think generates traffic. And that's really probably what the future of retail is going to look like. But I don't know if you have any specific questions, but this is just in line with the agreement that we entered to previously to pay them the portion above the sales tax that we normally collect to share back part of the investment that they made to make this happen and a success.
Okay, thank you, Keith.
Any
I know
questions?
we're going to vote on this tonight. Anyone have any questions?
Okay.
Okay, so number two, a resolution appropriating $67,627 in the Economic Development Division in the General Fund for a sales tax increment past performance payment to the East Bay Shopping Center. Again, presented by Keith.
So as I mentioned, the one that we just talked about, the Riverwoods, this is the first year for that one. This is the third payment, however, for the East Bay Shopping Center. So we entered into that agreement some time ago. And I think all of us have kind of seen the change that they've gone through and the kind of reinvention of the East Bay Shopping Center. That's going to continue to happen. This last year, a new investment company purchased that asset and have quite a few intentions to continue to revitalize that and add different retail opportunities there at that location. So I think we're going to see that continue to grow. But from my perspective, again, the fact that they're due $67,627 above what they were normally generating in our share back agreement is a reflection that they're doing well and headed in the right direction.
Okay, thank you so much. Any questions on this one? We'll see you tonight.
All right, thank you.
Okay, now we're going to hear a presentation of the fiscal year 2023, 2024 budget calendar. And that'll be presented by Kelsey Zarbach.
Hello. Before I go over the budget calendar with you, I would just want to point out that Andrea Wright is here from finance. She was recently promoted to be a budget analyst with us, and we're excited to have her. She'll be deeply involved with the budget process this year. So thank you, Andrea. Okay, so I'm here today to just give you a brief overview of our budget process for fiscal year 2024. If you look at the screen, we have a 2-page, very bullet point heavy calendar. I'm not going to go through each bullet point with you, but just to kind of give you an overview of what's going on this calendar, I've divided our budget process into 3 phases. So the first phase is the budget prep phase, which is from January to April. The second phase is the council review phase from May to June. And then the third phase, which is kind of optional, is the truth and taxation phase from July to August. So I'll just go through what's happening in each of those phases. So budget prep phase from January to April, it's pretty department administration heavy. There are 7 main tasks that we're trying to complete during this time. Those tasks are revenue projections, 5-year capital improvement plan reports, payroll budgets, operating budgets, supplemental requests, consolidated fee schedule updates, and then performance measures. So that's all going on in the background, mainly January through March, and then April is the month that the administration, the mayor's office, is reviewing everything that's been collected and compiled, and then deciding what needs to change, what supplemental requests can be included depending on revenues and so on. So that's what's going on during that time period. There are a few dates in that phase that the council is involved with specifically. I know that February 14th, I think, is the target date for departments to start giving budget presentations and work meeting. I know Justin's been working to kind of figure out what departments are involved and what questions to ask with all of you. So we've basically assumed on the calendar that there will be work meeting presentations between February 14th leading up to the tentative budget presentation, every work meeting. So that's one thing that's on there. Another date that the council is involved with is March 1st. That's when we'll be giving you the 5-year capital improvement plan. And it's not a presentation at that point. It's just available for you to review at that point in time. And then on March 14th, we'll come and actually do a presentation on what's included in there. And if you have questions, we can answer them at that time. Also on March 14th, we'll have a revenue presentation for you in work meeting. So those are kind of the council dates that we have listed in that budget prep phase. Moving into our second phase in May and June, it's the council review time. On May 2nd, that will be at the council meeting when the mayor presents the tentative budget to the council. Then on May 16th, we have scheduled the council adopts the tentative budget or tentatively adopts the tentative budget. That's kind of our time frame at that point. And not listed on the calendar, but I'm sure, well, it kind of alludes to that in May. I'm sure that council staff will be working with the administration to determine whether there are any additional presentations or meetings that you'd like to have based on your interests or questions about the budget. Then moving into June, we have 2 public hearings that will be scheduled. June 6th will be, well, it'll be a public hearing on the budget. And there'll also be another public hearing on June 6th regarding the utility transfer. So citizens can come and weigh in on that element. And then on June 22nd, one of 2 things could happen. The first is it will be a regular second public hearing on the budget, and then the council can adopt the final budget that night. Or if it's decided that we want to pursue a property tax increase potentially and want to go the truth and taxation route, then we can make any necessary amendments to the tentative budget at that point, temporarily adopt that until the final budget is adopted in August. So that takes us into the third phase, which is the truth and taxation phase. Not a lot has to happen during this time period, but we just need to make sure we schedule the truth and taxation hearing in July for a date in August, and then make sure proper noticing happens. And then in August, there'll be the actual hearing on the property tax increase, and then the final budget will need to be adopted by September 1st. So that's the budget calendar in a nutshell. I know it's a lot, and it's like, what, 8 months of the year. So A lot going on, but if you have any input, please let us know and we'll see a lot of you in the next few months.
Thank you, Kelsey. Well, luckily we like you.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
thanks.
Does anyone have a question for Kelsey?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item number 4, a discussion regarding parking and parking garages on Center Street in downtown Provo, presented by Mark, our council intern.
Well, greetings to the council, to the administration. Well, for today, we're going to talk about parking, and it's a lot. That was a parking joke. Parking lot, you know. My parking friend said it will be a hit. Oh, I gotta talk to them. Well, yeah, but specifically, public parking garages access in downtown Provo, specifically downtown and Center Street. So during the July 12th work meeting presentation, our dear friend, Mr. Thorpe, presented about parking in Center Street. So this would be more of a follow-up of what he discussed back then. So back then he talked about the available parking in Center Street and in downtown Provo. He also talked about the parking app, talked about wayfinding and parking enforcement. And during that discussion, a lot of questions from the council arose, and my goal is to hopefully answer those questions with me and help from our parking friends. They'll be coming. I feel they're coming. Sandy, our parking enforcement manager, and Dallin Pope. So let's start. Next. Oh, sorry. Got it.
Mark, while you have a break here, Travis Hoban has joined us on the bench, and we also have Wayne Parker and Mayor Michelle Gafusi.
Again, so some of the additional questions that arose during that July 12th presentation is about parking at PEG, Freedom Commons area, garages and public access, what available parkings are available, updates on the parking app. I know a majority of that discussion was about how is the parking app working and what are the updates about it, and also about our wayfinding project, wayfinding signs. So let me start with, there's actually another topic that I know the council would like me to research about. So there's actually 5 outside this 4, but it's about electric vehicles. And we have a whole new presentation about electric vehicles coming up. That's a teaser coming up. So I didn't include it in this one. So it's coming. Yep, I didn't forget it. It's like one of my main assignments. So let's start with the status of parking at PEG. So currently, Freedom Commons have 575 spaces available with paid public parking at a $2 per hour rate or $12 per day. Staff also found that there are like electric vehicle charging stations in the area. Next, here are some garages and public access at this area. Again, Freedom Commons, they have those spaces, 575 available parking, all wayfinding signs in place with paid public parking 24/7, again, at that rate that I mentioned. Marriott Garage at that 99 West, 100 North area, we have 349 spaces available, 120 paid public, 70 for long-term businesses and 50 for daily use. Again, paid public parking for 24/7 available. Town Square Garage, we have 226 spaces for parking, 50 free public spaces during the day. They also have free public parking nights and weekends, but no overnight parking. For our Wells Fargo Garage, 50 East, 100 North, we have 509 spaces with parking available for business patrons. For the Science Bank Garage at 180 North University Avenue, we have 323 spaces. Again, parking available for business patrons. For the New Skin Garage, we have 369 spaces with free public parking nights and weekends. Again, no overnight parking. For the Utah County Garage, we have 203 spaces, free public parking day and night, no overnight parking again. For our Utah State Garage, we have 626 spaces, free public parking day and night. Again, no overnight parking.
Mark, could you, sorry.
So go ahead.
Could you tell me what Utah State Garage, wait, 100 South, 100 East? I guess I don't know what that is.
It's
Utah-
like,
Utah
like-
State University, is it a?
it's one of our main parking areas. I haven't visited it. I got our info from our parking team, but I could do more research, or if they are here.
Okay.
Oh, Dallin.
Wayne
this-
can answer that question.
Okay, wait.
This is part of the government center, the state office building where the tax commission is and others.
Okay.
So there are, and again, they're unregulated spaces, mostly consumed by state employees during the day, but there's available free parking unmetered there.
Dallin, do you want something to that? Good. Sorry, that's it. Yep. So, yeah, but most of our information are also available online. Looking at this, we have the Provo Parking and Mobility Management website in our Provo website, where we can find more public versus private parking available. And again, this is available to the public. And most of the numbers from there are numbers that are also reflected here in this website. So, and now we'll be talking about updates in the parking app. So according to staff from our team, the Provo parking app is currently being tested. It will be available from our current parking software provider, which is Paylock. Paylock is that company, which is our vendor we partner with that provide these parking tools and services. We've been partnered with them for a while. The cost is 35 cents per transaction and a 2.95% credit card transaction fee. Our current issue about our parking app is currently our vendor, Paylock, is currently working with our IS team on making that connection happen in between, especially for the transfer of data for those general software information. But yeah, we'll be working on getting more updates from our parking team and from our IS team. I know they've been working hard on this. Sandy has been working hard on this. So, yep, that's our update so far when it comes to the parking app. I know this was big during last meeting. Any additional questions about parking app?
Yeah, I had a question. So the transactions, you're just talking about, it'd be the transactions of the paid spots that we have in the couple garages.
I would ask Sandy to help me with that question. So your question is, what is the 35 cents for?
Like the transactions would just be for the couple paid garages that we have, right? I think there's 3 of them.
No, the parking app will not be used in the parking garages. This will be on Center Street, 8th North, or wherever the city council deems you want to test paid on-street parking.
So right now we don't have any, but for future paid on-street parking, this would be what we would use.
Correct.
Would we also use the same app for parking at like the airport or other places where we'd have paid parking in the city?
Well, go Sandy.
Would we use the same app for parking at the airport?
Right now, the parking at the airport is done through the airport. That would be something through Brian Torgerson. The challenge that we have is money for the travelers at the airport or long-term parking at the airport cannot be combined with our regular parking revenues. And so again, that would be the challenge there. It could potentially, if we could keep the money separate. Yes.
It would certainly be easier for citizens that way.
Yes, it would be easier for all of us. And we do enforce parking down at the airport. So any parking citation that we give down there does come into the parking revenue. Again, it's just that paid parking for, long-term parking or anything like that.
I do think, I'm sure that apps can work that, right, into different buckets that they put.
I think so. Again, I think it would just be something that we would need to work on and come together. Yes.
We get an idea of if we're interested in looking further into that. Council interest in making sure that the parking is all on one app or?
This Paylock, the app that we followed is one that they wrote for, I believe, Detroit. I mean, so this parking app would be used for paid on street parking. It would be used for permits. It would be used for visitor permits. It could be used across the board for all parking needs.
Thanks, Sandy.
Uh-huh.
George has a comment.
Well, this is maybe just a thought for the mayor, because in the development of the website and the conversation we had about the city app, seems like if you have a kind of one-stop function on an app where you can look at parking, you can look at events calendars. I don't know if that's too ambitious, but seems like maybe that's better than having separate apps doing different kinds of things. I don't know, just a thought.
Well, so this is our app looks like, homepage, and the park and payment section of the app. Just give you a preview, another teaser. Updates on the wayfinding signs. A bid estimate has been received for phase 4 of the wayfinding project. The total amount of $237,000, 886. And this include labor and signs together. This is total amount. Again, for more resources about Provo parking and mobility, there's a lot of information I found in our website, which they have information about parking, all those stuff I talked about, what are available parkings, private and public, bike parking. All of this information is in our website, so just put it out there. Any questions or recommendation or other angles you would like me to research more about this topic?
I did have a question about the budget. Like, is this money we've allocated yet for the signage?
So,
Sandy
let me
might-
ask Sandy again.
Thank you, Sandy.
No, it hasn't. I know Tom requested in last year's budget, but it wasn't granted. And so again, this is phase 4. The previous staff did a 5-phase project on these wayfinding. So this would be something we would be coming to the council for. And it's also, we're looking at perhaps using some of the bird scooter and mobility monies that we're getting, that maybe this could be put into helping with the purchase of these wayfinding signs.
That'd be great. Thank you. Any other questions? Rachel.
Yeah, so we've had previous discussions about the parking garages that are either owned or partially owned by the city, but are operated by different managing companies and things like that. Is that the best way for us to continue to manage those assets? That's a terrible question.
That is. I think that that's a very good opening to a conversation that perhaps needs to be made. Is it something that we all want to look at? Is it something that you want a parking authority to maybe come in and somewhat oversee the parking garages? It is a very confusing subject. And remember, I've only been here 4 months as far as the parking garages. But yes, I think that it's a conversation that needs to be made, and it needs to be had with a lot of stakeholders on the subject to see how we could best utilize these parking garages. And is it working for the city that the way we're doing it? Is it working for our customers and our public that are coming downtown? And is it working for those that are actually running the parking garages?
Thanks, Sandy. Yeah, I agree that I'm definitely interested in that also. And if it's the wisest way to use revenue, because I assume we have to pay them. So just wondering financially if it makes the most sense and if customer service wise, it makes the most sense.
Exactly. And, you know, because in a lot of these garages, we have public stalls. But again, we don't regulate how much they're charging for those public stalls or how easily accessible those public stalls are. So that's something that we need to look at again for our public customer service. Oh, and Keith.
Sorry, I stepped away to get a computer problem fixed.
Keith Morley.
We've talked about this in the past, and I don't know what the clear answer is because so many of the parking structures we don't own. The partnership that the city's had with these businesses has been that we, for example, own the property underneath, but we don't own the structure itself. So, for example, we do own some of the spaces in the Marriott parking facility. They'd like to buy that back from us or have us donate that to them or whatever so that they can own it. To me, that's an asset I'm not sure I'm ready to let go of until I kind of understand how we're going to manage these going forward, because I think it's a lever that we can possibly utilize. And I don't know what the best pathway forward is, but one of the things that I've considered and thought might be helpful is for us to form a parking authority, even if there's no authority or bylaws or anything to it at all. Let's just form the entity. And then we could go to the businesses and say, hey, we formed a parking authority. We're not exactly sure what we should or shouldn't do, but we'd love to meet with you and talk about how do we manage the parking asset in downtown Provo? Is there a way for us to work together so that all the rate structures are consistent from structure to structure to structure, that the signage is consistent, that the messaging is consistent, that we're all working together to create wayfinding information or apps or whatever that show what parking availability is and where it is in downtown Provo. And we do that through this parking authority. If we have a poor player who's not keeping the structure up the way it should, could the parking authority potentially be an asset that we could utilize to help encourage or to motivate or to whatever we need to do to make sure that these structures and assets are being maintained the way they should. Right now, there's just so many different people doing different things that I don't sense a good cohesion that I think is to our detriment. And I don't, because everybody kind of owns their own thing, I think there's probably going to be some resistance to us stepping in and telling them what to do, or us creating a parking authority and mandating for them what to do. But I think if we approached it more openly and said, we just created this because we think it could help, let's all get together and decide what that looks like. Maybe that's a good approach. So that's kind of what we're playing with.
So this would be a kind of entity that would address both public parking, but the parking for businesses that they require and management of structures and trying to balance all of those needs.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of having an entity that's tasked with doing that. And that's the only thing that they really care about.
Today, I mean, maybe at some point,
Yeah.
there's more. Maybe at some point we create a revenue structure and they build one, I mean, and manage it and own it. I mean, I don't know, but I mean, today I don't know what they could do except for maybe start a conversation.
Yeah, I know there's always hesitation to introduce another government entity to do things for people, to people. But it seems like we do need to have someone with that accountability and ability to make those negotiations and to make decisions. Right now, it feels too dispersed.
Yeah, I agree.
Keith, one more question. I just want to clarify. So the only parking spots that Provo City owns in total, like the land and the spot, is the street behind Center Street, those parking spots behind the businesses?
We own that. We own those spaces,
Okay.
but the lease agreement that we have with Provo Town Square gives them the accountability to manage those for
Yes.
us. And that's been in place for a long, long time.
Yes.
Then, of course, the street parking, because the streets are ours,
Right.
right? And the spaces that we own in the Marriott facility. I think those are the only ones that we actually own outright. Now, we do have, I think the agreement that we have with Freedom Commons gives them responsibility to make so many spots available for the public to meet the convention center demand and the agreement that we have with the county. So there's some things like that. But as far as ones that we physically own, David, and you may know, to my knowledge, the Marriott Center is the only one that we actually own in a structure.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Anyone else have a question? Counselor Shipley.
Yeah, I'm supportive of some kind of authority to start. I guess the first place I'd like to see some information on is that these folks who operate with with some kind of subsidy, right? Either we own the land or we own the lots or whatever, or we own some of the parking spaces. the moment that they gate it and charge, it almost becomes a subsidy that doesn't have any, benefit to the city because, so I guess what I'm interested in is to know the usage by the public in some of these spaces that are gated, because I don't have a sense in Marriott, for example, or Freedom, once you put the gate and once you start charging, if any of the public's even utilizing that resource. And that goes back to maybe being more consistent with how we operate and how we charge for these different spaces, because if the city subsidizes those parking spaces with the idea that they're going to be publicly accessible, which they are, but then there's a gate and a charge, and there's other places that don't have a gate and a charge, then we've just subsidized something that I don't think we're getting a public return for.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's a little bit complicated. I'm not a parking expert, but I think you have to think of the asset in a different way. For example, if I go into a parking structure and I can't park there because those are reserved spots that have been dedicated for tenants or people, the retail establishments or the offices, I may look at that and say, well, that's worthless because I can't use it. On the other hand, because those spaces have a dedicated spot, it improves their opportunity for them to lease the retail establishments out or the office establishments out, correct? And also eliminates those people from parking on the street and taking other spots that I, as a consumer or patron of a retail establishment, would want to go to. So the concept of whether it's valuable to us or not, I think is a little bit, you have to think about it differently and say, there's a certain block of it that has to be reserved for this use to make sense. Another block that's maybe more available to the public, another block that maybe you charge for some on-street parking that maybe you take your chance you don't have to pay for. Does that make sense? It's just, there's kind of a sliding scale of how available is it and who is it available to, and is it free or do they have to pay?
Yeah, and I guess I would just say that I'm supportive of the the parking authority, that too. But also, I think there's just some information that we're missing before we can have a good conversation.
Me too.
I mean, what kind of usage are any of these
Right.
even having from a public standpoint at this point?
And I just threw that out because you were talking about it. And I had told Sandy, matter of fact, we just had this conversation a couple of days, that I had tried to have this conversation with her predecessor, that I thought that it was an agenda we should push forward, because I think it's a way to start the conversation. And we haven't done that yet, or done enough of our homework to be able to present it to you as to why. But because you're talking about it, I thought it was kind of an open opportunity in a work session to plant the seed and say, I think this might be a way forward. I think it will create a forum and a group that can become more educated than I am or you are, that can inform us on what the real issue is and how we could properly manage it in partnership with these businesses in a way that makes sense.
Rachel?
Yeah, so I think it would be useful if you guys could think through what that authority would look like, who would have to be involved, what kind of cost would be associated with forming this, if it requires employees, or do you know what I mean? So get that kind of research done so that you can come
Sure.
to us and we
I agree.
can make it happen.
I'll just tell you that my basic pedestrian concept of this is, let's just do it. Let's not incur any costs or assign any staff to it. I mean, except for, we're just going to create one, right? Whatever legislatively we have to do as far as with our legal department to create an organization or whatever that might have some authority or whatever. And then we can go to the different entities and say, we created this thing. We're not really sure exactly what's the best way to use it, but you all have parking structures. Help us define what that could look like. And I think from there, then you could scale it to say, should we have an employee? Should we not? Should it be a Provo City employee or somebody else? Should there be a board? Who should be on the board? I think you could start to define it once we knew more, but I would suggest we not incur any costs or hire any specific staff for that until we know what we need. Let's just create the entity, and that would create the forum to have the conversation.
Thanks, Keith. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Shannon.
Yeah, I guess I would take it the opposite approach, that we would not put the cart before the horse, and we would do the research that Councilor Whipple recommended, because creating an authority without any governance seems like just merely writing a blank check, or it's literally providing authority that there's no structure around. So it seems like there could be conversations convened and homework done before setting up an authority. And then there would be, in conjunction with setting up an authority, proper boundaries and proper governance, so that that does provide a public service. Creating an authority just for a conversation, I'm not sure that that's the only alternative that would serve that purpose. I think there might be something better suited to creating a conversation than setting up a whole authority and pushing bylaws and pushing structure aside. So I agree with Councilor Whipple and Councilor Shipley that some homework needs to be done to create some detail to what's being proposed.
Okay, thank you. I think it's agreed that we need to bring this back at a further work meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, what time is it? We're just going to keep going. I want to acknowledge that we have Councilor Fillmore with us. We're going to do a discussion regarding supplementary housing audit. It'll be presented by Malia Daly.
Hey, hi, council. So we had some discussions at the end of last year about this. And then we touched back on it on our priority work meeting on January 10th. And there was a motion made there for staff to look into. I'll just go ahead and go to the next slide. This housing database that the state commissioned through the Gardner Policy Institute. So looking into that and reaching out to them, I actually reached out to the people who are actually in charge of creating the database, and they have not gotten back to me for 2 weeks. So I'm still waiting to hear back from them. But I have been listening to the Commission on Housing Affordability, and they just recently presented at the December 27th meeting there, where they finalized the methodology and determinants within the database. And so I can go over that with you. And then as a council, you can decide if you want to go ahead and move forward with a supplementary or just our own Provo housing inventory database audit, what you want to call it. So first, just an overview of theirs, so that way we know what is going to be coming from the state. And as far as timeline, they're expecting this particular database to be done at the end of Q2. So sometime this summer. So I just pulled some quotes from when they presented to the Housing Commission. So this database is of moderate and affordable housing demand and supply at the city level, specifically for cities that have over 5,000 residents. So we would be included in that. But this is more of, as in that second quote, you can see a macro, kind of a bigger database where it's going to be looking at just moderate and affordable housing, and not necessarily the granular level of what that stock looks like, but what the demand is at a city level, a county level, and a state level, and then what the supply is. So I'll kind of explain that a little bit more. So they're going to include, there's three main parts of this database. So the demand, what is the demand per city, county, statewide of moderate and affordable housing? And then what is the supply in comparison to that demand? And then what are their future needs? So kind of predicting out. I think this is unique and something that the state has a unique kind of position to do good projections. And then also the people working at the Gardner Policy Institute have access to some data that will really, and expertise to help them with these projections, which I think will be really helpful for us. But like I said, this database is going to focus more on, you can see here, it'll just say like renter households and then like affordable or available rental homes. So it's not going to have, I know in our work meeting, we had discussed like how many ADUs or how many apartments do we have or how many single family homes. This database isn't going to get down that specific per city, but rather have big categories for things and then show what the demand is and what the supply is. And then they're going to project shortfall projections or not shortfalls, project what the needs are throughout the state. They're also going to include that. They're going to have some control variables, some other identifying variables, for example, by income group and AMIs. So that'll also kind of help narrate why the demand is so much more impactful than in some areas than others, because your AMI, maybe the area median income of your city is the average for citizens is lower than in another city. And so your demand is unique to somewhere else. But again, it's not going to be as specific as we have discussed, as the council has previously indicated that they would like. So with that information, there's some possible next steps that as staff, we're just looking for some direction and an official motion or no motion from the council, so that way we can kind of move forward with this. So that first, there's 3 options here. So, and you can make up your own options as well, but these are just 3 that I thought of. It's directing staff to draft an RFP for a comprehensive Provo housing database. And the RFP, we can work on the format and functionality, the parameters for that, and we would work to get that out in time so that way we can get proposals back, hopefully, so that way they can be included in the budget. So when we're making this budget, it can be within that. We can also wait for the Gardner database that will come out and then decide on how we want to supplement that, or if we want to change and shape ours based on theirs. We can use existing data and reports and not go forward with this, and then we can wait and always revisit. Some things to keep in mind if we do go forward with staff looking into an RFP for an audit is what specific data points the council would like within a housing audit and inventory. And this is something where we can come up with that within the next 2 weeks if there is a motion today, and then come back and just finalize that. Or we can do this through leadership and have leadership look over things, and we can send it out to the council and get approval that way. But just some things to think about, like, do you want just high density, or do you want that to be broken down like apartments, micro units, duplex, ADUs? If you think about the moderate income housing plan that we just passed with the general plan, that had some specific breakdowns of this is how many ADUs are in the city, this is apartments, this is how many housing units by the number of bedrooms that are in each unit, things like that, which then they can also tie into AMIs and kind of match those up, which is helpful when you're looking at analysis for making decisions. But then there's also control variables and just kind of things that help you tell a story and kind of narrate better and I know the purposes of this audit is to help make better land use decisions and what housing needs are specific around the city. So looking at demographics, you could break it down by neighborhood, owner occupancy versus tenants, units by bedrooms, age of the housing, the sale value, targeted income groups, etc. There's a lot there that we could include. So as staff now, we're just kind of seeing if there's any additional discussion or if you have a motion, and then we are kind of prepped to get working on this if you would like.
Okay. Counselor Shipley.
So I think we're all anxious to see some more detailed information, but my question is, when is that report supposed to be completed? I missed that.
Yeah, it's supposed to be completed by this summer, that for the one that we just reviewed. And then they did mention the Commission on Housing Affordability, when they did present this in December, they did ask if they were going to have the more specific data available. All of this data is going to be public facing and available for cities and the public to look at, and cities also to use and analyze. But they asked about more micro level data, and they said that is a future thing, that they would need more funding to look at that. And so there's no time.
We're pretty sure this is going to be high level, even the one in the summer. That makes sense.
Yeah. So like I said here, like when they said just like renter households, and then it'll say like by income type, but it's not going to be as specific as even our moderate income housing report. It won't be as specific as that for Provo itself.
So my initial reaction is, as far as a go forward suggestion, is for us to wait for the summer for that big report. I wouldn't mind putting an RFP out for the two colleges here locally to see if there's anybody who will bite on doing some work on this. But as far as having a private entity, I guess I'm thinking ahead. I don't know what the cost would be, but the way that we want it to be done, really, really, really granular. I'm just going to guess that somebody's going to charge us quite a bit for that. And so my idea is maybe wait for the summer, put it past both the universities to see if anybody will bite on that as a class or department. But outside of that, I'd probably wait for the summer.
Counselor Fillmore.
I just add, I'm very comfortable with what Mr. Shipley has recommended. I think it makes a lot of sense to wait. It'll save us some money, certainly, and we won't reinvent half the wheel anyway in the process. And let's wait and see what the state does. The Gardner Institute does good work, and it could be a waste of time and money to try to preempt much of what they're going to be doing.
Counselor Handley.
Go ahead. You want
I was just going to add one thing. When I do hear back from them, because I will follow up till I hear back from them, I did ask for a list of determinants that they are including, so data points that in the categories specifically, so we can send that out or come back to a work meeting and review those, so you can actually see exactly what they're looking. And then I also asked for a list of their primary source data materials, so we can see what data sources they were looking at to see if they have to see what they're leaning on to do their analysis and their data. So along with some other questions, but those two, I think once we get that would be very helpful. So.
Well, that's helpful to my comment. I'm inclined to get that information and then explore right away what it might cost for us to get the supplementary information, as long as we have the correct parameters. Because if we just do nothing for 6 months, then we won't get this housing audit until sometime well into 2024. And I just, maybe I've been on the council too long and we've been talking about the need for one for 5 years. And I'd rather get those parameters set and then explore what the price tag would be. And then we can make a decision as to whether we want to spend the money. But I feel pretty strongly that we need this information and we need it specific to our city. We need the granular information. So I'm pretty confident that the Gardner Institute's data is going to be helpful only up to a point. And then we're going to feel like we're still in the dark on a lot of questions about our unique housing situation. And I'd rather just aggressively try to solve that problem now. But my preference would be to get that information back from you and then shape an RFP and see what the cost might be.
Counselor Whipple.
My comment was going to be very similar to George's. Once they finally answer you and we know what they're looking at, I suspect that they won't be looking at things like our batching singles that we do around campus. And that's data that I think we really need to know. And I would like to do a specific enough look at our housing stock to know which houses could potentially have ADUs, like which ones had the mother-in-law apartments or were owned by older people who took advantage of the living in place and having a couple live there, but they're not legal ADUs, but maybe they're currently illegal ADUs. So I want that level of detail to know what's a potential ADU and where we're getting these potential illegal ADUs. Because we don't have a full sense of our housing stock unless we know how those single family homes are actually being used. And that seems to me to be a very fact intensive kind of thing that requires not just looking at the county records, but maybe actually looking at the properties. And that would be expensive, but I'm very confident that that would not be addressed by the Ken Gardner Institute's research.
Counselor Fillmore.
Yeah, let me just kind of qualify my prior statement. I'm all in favor of the audit. I think we have to have that. I just want to make it cost effective. If we can get enough information from the preliminary Ken Gardner study, that allows us to tailor an RFP. I'm not opposed to getting that out early. What I would caution, however, though, is that the population of Provo is fairly mobile and up and down according to season. And I'm not sure that we took a snapshot at any one particular time of year, we're going to have an accurate report. I think if we want an accurate audit, it's going to have to be a 4-season audit to kind of get a sense of how things modulate over time. But if we can crack down to the granular level, I think we'll all be benefited, not just the city council and administrators, but developers, everybody else.
Thank you. Shannon texted me just to say that she is interested in doing our own audit every 3 years and that we need the data. I tend to agree that I don't believe the data we're going to get is going to give us anything we don't know. I think it's going to be already information we have. I don't see it giving us much more detail than we already have. I think that we definitely need to do our own audit. And I know when I was campaigning, I talked to multiple ex-council members, and that was one of their things. Like, we never got a housing audit. We never got a housing audit. Three of them, I think, said that to me. And how they regretted that, how they could make a decision without it, and it was such needed data. And I really love what Logan did with how specific their data was. And they knew their whole city, and they knew it well. And they knew who had licenses, who didn't, where the capacity was for ADUs, where there was batching, where there wasn't batching. That's just a narrative that we don't have at all. And it makes a big difference considering, because I even think the stats we have as far as so many 4-bedroom houses or whatever, that's not, in a lot of ways, that's not relevant in the sense that a lot of those are used for batching. So that'd be taken out of like the family, group of housing. We just need more specifics. So I definitely concur with George and Rachel on their specifics. Any more questions?
Well, I think Mali's kind of
Travis.
asking for
Yeah. I was
an
gonna ask
indication
if
of what we
there's
want to
an
do, if we
official
want to
motion.
move forward with an RFP or just wait for information for Gardner Institute, right?
Let's get some specifics. Counselor Handley.
Well, yeah, so I don't know if this requires a motion, but my recommendation would be to have you come back and give us that detail from the Chem Gardner Institute. And at that point, we can make a motion. Does that give you enough instruction for now?
I don't know that we need a motion to have them prepare an RFP, and I don't have any aversion to that at all.
Okay.
So I think if we're thinking we need to take a vote, because I initially said, I don't mind getting an RFP out and getting pricing.
But isn't the point that the RFP will be a function how much Gardner ends up doing? It saves us time and money.
I'm not sure you're talking close enough to your microphone, Dave. Okay.
No, you understand what we're saying.
Yes.
In order to put an RFP that's precise enough, we're going to have to wait and see to some extent what the Gardner Institute is doing, how far along they are, and then measure that against the more granular study we want in Provo. And that's my only point.
Yeah, and that's something I asked a lot of questions of them, so maybe that's why they haven't gotten back to me yet. But I think once we do get that information, then Michael and I should be able to put something together, and we can come back to you on the when is our next meeting? The 14th? That one, it's kind of a full work meeting, but we can squeeze like 10 minutes. And we can just come back and talk to you about that, and we can even kind of shape what an RFP would look like given that information.
Counselor Whipple.
So on shaping the RFP, that would be where we set out the parameters of what we want for that. I think it'd be really helpful to loop Brandon Larson in on that conversation.
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
I was waiting until kind of figured out what we wanted to do here, and then definitely talk to them, especially with the moderate income housing report. I feel like they've already done a lot of great work with that. And so talking to them and including them would be wise.
Thank you.
Okay, so do you need any more direction from us? or
No,
is-
I think we're good.
Okay. I hope that we can piggyback somewhat off the Gardner results, but I don't see that happening. I think we're gonna have to start from scratch with our own, but. Okay, next item, a discussion of alternative forms of voting. And this will be presented by Michael Sanders, one of our policy analysts.
Counselor McKay. Chair McKay, did you want to take a break? We had one in our schedule, but we can keep plugging along if you guys are.
Yes, let's take a break. We'll take a 10-minute break.
Recording stopped.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah. I'm paranoid. Ready? I didn't know, like, I had to, like, adjust the microphone.
Like past my
Recording in progress.
Okay, we are back from break. We're next going to do a discussion on alternative forms of voting, and this will be presented by our policy analyst, Michael Sanders.
Okay, good afternoon, Council. So the topic today is alternative form of voting, or in other words, ranked choice voting. This topic was brought to us at the request of Councilor Hanley and Councilor Whipple. And just as a little bit of context, this issue has been going on for about the past 5 years, since 2018. The council has been given several presentations, over 20 plus pages of memos over the years, and has been put up on Open City Hall, and all of those materials have been linked inside of your packet. So during this presentation, we're just going to go over a brief history of the issue from the council. We're just going to look real quick over what is ranked choice voting, just a quick review for those who may not be familiar with the subject. Quickly gloss over the 2021 Open City Hall response from Provo City. We'll look at some other cities that have implemented ranked choice voting in the past, some possible changes that may occur during this legislative session at the state, pros, cons, final notes, and then some council options. So once upon a time in 2018, the state legislature approved HB 35, which was the piece of legislation that provided for a 6-year pilot program to allow municipal governments doing nonpartisan elections to participate in ranked choice voting if they chose to or not. The council held work meetings on September 25th and December 18th to discuss the issue, and they decided not to move forward and opt into the program for the 2019 elections, and rather pass an intent statement to further explore the issue for the 2021 elections. And in 2019, only 2 Utah cities, Payson and Vineyard, participated in the program. In 2020, the council again held 2 more work meetings in August and December, but they, rather than opt into the program, they deferred to the state legislature because there was the possibility of updates to HB 35 and to include extra methods of voting. But those bills did not pass, but instead HB 35 passed in the legislature, which clarified that the legislative body, or in this case, the municipal council, would make the determination whether or not to participate in the pilot program, and they also extended the filing date to May. 2021, they heard it again in March. It was put on Open City Hall for citizen input, and then in May, there was a motion to participate in the pilot program, which failed 2-5. And in 2021, the number of Utah cities that participated in ranked choice voting increased from 2 to 23. Okay, so this video is just a quick explanation from the Salt Lake County Clerk's office describing how ranked choice voting works.
Pick your favorite fruit using ranked choice voting. Instead of making just one choice from among apples, oranges, pears, and bananas, we rank them in order of our preference, from our favorite to our least favorite. Apples are my favorite, but if I can't have them, then I want bananas. And if I can't have either of those, then oranges are okay. Pears are my least favorite. In the first phase of the race, we count up the totals. Under the rules of ranked choice voting, it's not enough to get the most votes in a race. You have to get more than 50% of the votes to win. In this case, since 18 people cast votes, the winner needs to get at least 10. Right now, oranges are ahead, but they only have 6 votes, so we can't declare them the winner. We'll have to go to a second phase. In the second phase, we eliminate the candidate with the fewest votes. That means pears are out. The votes from pear lovers will be going to their second choice. In this case, that's 1 for apples, 1 for bananas, and 1 for oranges. Still no majority. On to the third phase. Now we have to say goodbye to bananas. That gives 4 more votes to apples and 1 to oranges. Apples now have 10 votes to oranges 8. Apples are our winner.
Oops. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Salt Lake County, for that wonderful video. Okay, in 2021, the City Council office put a small survey on Open City Hall to poll the citizens about ranked choice voting. This was an unscientific poll. It was not targeted towards any specific audiences or using random sampling at all. It was just whoever took the survey. And but there was only 154 registered responses. So as far as representation of Provo, that's very, very small. But as far as Open City Hall, that's, I guess, okay. But if you attribute each of these responses to 2 minutes, it comes up to 9 hours worth of public comment. And according to the surveys, most of those people had heard of ranked choice voting, but also most of them had not had any experience whatsoever using it. Most of them perceived that Provo campaigns were at least somewhat positive. And most of them were either neutral or positive regarding election outcomes in the city. And most of them were supportive of the use of ranked choice voting in Provo for the 2021 elections. In addition to that, in 2021, after those 23 cities had used ranked choice voting, the Fair Votes organization partnered with Y2 Analytics to do a scientific survey where they surveyed people from those 23 cities who had used ranked choice voting and standard elections to kind of get a more comprehensive view on how people in the state were feeling regarding ranked choice voting for those who had used it. According to the survey, rating the ease of ranked choice voting, like how easy was it or was it nice to use, 81% of people said they were either very or somewhat easy, 19% somewhat or very difficult. Whether they liked it or not, 61% said they liked it somewhat or a great deal, 39% people disliked it. Okay, and then as for the other cities, this is regarding those 23 cities that had used it in the 2021 election. I reached out to the recorders and city clerks and received a variety of responses from them. Some of the bigger cities like Lehigh and Salt Lake City did not get back to me, unfortunately, but this is kind of a blanket overview of what everyone was saying, kind of normal things they were saying. So most of the 23 cities who participated in the pilot programs were very small towns and cities, not really super comparable to Provo. And a lot of them were saying that the main reason for participation was the cost savings on the primary. These were small towns that have very constrained budgets and they want to save money as any way they can. As far as some things that the counties were saying is that they may be charged more for ranked choice voting in the future due to increased education efforts or increased costs due to more complex and longer ballots, more ink, paper, staff time, all that stuff really adds up quickly. Hasn't been any indication of how much it will cost. They haven't decided yet, but there is some consensus that it costed more for the counties to do it than they had originally anticipated.
Quick question on that.
Yeah.
So the additional costs that the counties would charge to account for these education and the ballots, is that still less than the cost of doing a primary and an election?
100% unknown, but I think that it would be less than that because you're essentially cutting it in the cost of your election in half without doing a primary. So it may cost more. It will cost a little bit more, but the main barrier would be voter education. So you would just have to weigh on like, it would be a little bit more expensive, but what's your values on that?
Counselor Hanley.
Are there any cities that used it for a primary?
According to all the recorders and clerks that got back to me, they did not hold a primary using it. They just went straight to the general election.
Okay. Well, could I ask a follow-up on that? I assume that would have changed how soon people would have declared running or when campaigning started? Maybe you don't know. Maybe it's too early to know if that makes a big difference, but it seems like it would.
It would influence it. But I did ask them if there were more candidates, and most of that did file, and most of them said that they had about the same number of candidates at least.
Okay.
Counselor Hoban.
I was just gonna maybe answer this or say something about George. I think we discussed maybe doing it here just for the primary, and they were like, well, then we're not saving any money. So I think that's probably why most of those cities opted to not do a primary, because I think the idea was, let's do it for a primary and see how it goes. But then you don't get the cost savings, right? Because you're still holding the primary in the general.
Yeah, and also, Councilor Hoban, one of the reasons why, regarding the past discussions, the council was originally wanting to do it for the general election, but they wanted to do it just for the primary, but the city recorder had already determined to hold a primary election and noticed it. Then that restricted the council to just do it for the general election at that time.
Michael, question.
Yeah.
So if you do away with the primary, you have virtually unlimited number of people.
Correct.
Who can run in the fall election, right?
Correct.
So multiple parties, for that matter, multiple members of the same party. There's really no strict ceiling on the number, because you can't disqualify people if they meet the minimum criteria, right?
Yeah, that is correct. But Provo City does do nonpartisan elections.
Right, but people know what people's inclinations are. Yes. So the point is, you could have 20 plus people, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
I mean, theoretically.
Theoretically, yes, but most of the recorders and clerks that I spoke to all said that they had a normal amount of people file, no outrageous numbers.
In those small cities.
In those small cities, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so just any more questions on the subject? Okay, so just continuing with the with this. Just going to, yeah.
Michael, could I just interject one comment?
Yeah.
Just while we're on that topic of using it for the primary versus the general election, I don't know the date for this, so this is something I'd have to research, but if there is interest in using it for the primary, you should be aware that although the statute says the deadline is May 1st to elect to opt in, as Michael mentioned in the previous time, the city recorder has a deadline by which they have to announce the dates of relevant activities. And we couldn't elect to use it for the primary after they've already published. So if there's interest in doing that, we need to find out what the deadline is, because it's going to be before May 1st.
Michael, can you tell us what Utah County cities are now committed to ranked choice voting besides Payson and Vineyard?
Yeah, so after talking, that was one question that I asked them, and most of them said that they have not yet decided whether or not they will participate again. I think we could probably definitely assume that Payson and Vineyard will probably opt in, since they did do it 2 times in a row. But all of the other Utah County cities are still wondering. They're still discussing that among their councils at this time.
So when you alluded to 23 Utah cities, were those cities who actually did it in 2021?
Yes.
And were there only 2 Utah County cities, Vineyard and Payson, or were there others?
Let's see.
The number 23 is statewide, right?
Yeah, so what do we have on here? We've got Lehigh, Payson, Vineyard, Springville. Woodland Hills. Yeah, I don't know the Utah County super well, those small cities, but yeah. Okay, so just moving forward, there are some bills at the state legislature currently that may change the alternative voting methods pilot program. Both of them are currently just in the House Government Operations Committee, not currently on any agenda. But they're HB 171, which proposes to repeal the municipal alternative voting methods pilot project, and also HB 176, which will expand the voting pilot project to include approval voting as a second option that you could vote to use. Approval voting is essentially vote for as many candidates as you like on the ballot, whoever you approve for. So yeah, that's kind of an interesting one. We haven't really looked into that at all. We don't know very much about it, but it could possibly be voted on in the state legislature to be included.
Can you explain what that means?
Approval voting?
Yeah.
Yeah, so approval voting would be, say that there are 5 people on the ballot and you like the first and the second person. You can vote for person A and person B on your ballot so that
As first choices?
no, you don't indicate any choices. They're both ranked equally. So it would the idea is to basically show the true level of support among all candidates at the end. Yes, George?
Yeah, it seems like without the ranking, it doesn't quite guarantee that, though. I mean, just in response to the worry about, higher numbers of candidates, ranked choice voting is designed actually to prevent against extremist positions getting elected under such scenarios. So it doesn't mean that there's political mayhem. It actually helps to sort through the candidates in a reasonable way, so that you can pick and rank your top 3. You don't have to rank everyone. Even if you say these 7 are totally unacceptable to me, then they don't get a vote at all, which makes it even that much harder for people to get through. But if you're not ranking it, it seems to me that that's a little risky. Anyway.
Yeah, so we'll keep you guys in tune about how these bills are doing in the legislature. Okay, now we'll just go over some quick of the pros and cons of ranked choice voting. Claims to, and these are all claims, by the way, that each one of these have significant nuances and are very hard to prove scientifically, and there's very, very little research done about these. So they claim to eliminate the spoiler effect or the split vote. This is kind of the scenario. If there were two candidates that have similar ideals, they draw enough people away from each other that the most unfavorable third candidate would be the winner. There's a claim that it increases voter turnout, a claim that it will encourage candidates to run a positive campaign, that it reduces polarization, and that there are reduced costs due to no primary. Cons say that there may lead to voter confusion, strategic voting, which means that people would they would try to come up with a way to rank people in a way to influence the outcome of the election rather than voting their true preferences. Another is ballot exhaustion. I just wanted to kind of go over this one a little bit. Ballot exhaustion is the scenario where if a person would vote for a smaller number of candidates that are listed on the ballot, then there's potential for ballot exhaustion, meaning that when candidates started getting eliminated, that your vote potentially would no longer be tabulated in the final score. So for example, in Sandy, in the 2021 election, they originally had 23,000 people vote in the election. And in the final tabulation of the scores for the final round, there were only 17,000 votes that counted towards the final tabulation of scores. So ballot exhaustion is a potential issue. Also, compromise candidates, that's where people's first choice isn't winning and the person who's the winner is everybody's second or third choice. And the final con would be increased costs, and that could be related to the county charging more, or there being increased cost for the city to educate voters, depending on what they chose to do. Now, just some final notes on this as we're coming to the end. This is a pilot program only. This is not to make ranked choice voting the law in Provo. It would, if we would vote on it now, we would vote to be using it in the 2023 election, and then we would have to re-opt in for the 2025 election. And then after that, there would be no more options to do it in the future. It would be up to the state legislature to continue that. Second point, the city recorder has discretion on which election it would be used for, the primary or the general election. The legislature could change the rules regarding how this program is implemented during this or any other future legislative session. And the deadline to opt into this program is May 1st. The last time for council action would be the April 18th working council meetings. So here before you, I just have a couple of potential options following discussion. We could do nothing, which means that just the issue wouldn't progress any further. We could have a motion on the table for the staff to look into a particular point of ranked choice voting or anything else and come back on a specific work meeting. We could have a motion that we will participate in the pilot program and see where that goes, or any other motion as council sees fit. but the time is now yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Michael. I have to say that your packet and our agenda was awesome. I loved all the information you provided, so thank you so much. All right, council, anybody want to discuss anything? Councilor Hoban.
I actually used to be a real big proponent of RCV and participated in some elections with the Utah County Republican Party and some of the things that we had done. And then I became a candidate. No, just kidding. But I think there are some things to consider. So from a candidate standpoint, it's obviously going to, I think it would increase the number of candidates and then the number of money spent on elections by candidates and things like that. I don't know if it would lengthen the election cycle. Probably not, because you would just not do a primary. I think but probably the biggest things are, I don't know, like when I participated in RCV, it was confusing. And I know that it said 80% said it wasn't confusing, but man, there were definitely moments of confusion with RCV and a lot of people next to me, saying, okay, so what do I do here? How do I rank these people? Do I leave off a candidate? Can I leave them off? Can I not? Things like that. And then also, I guess just big picture, I just kind of wonder if it ain't broke, don't fix it type of thing. So I don't want to sound apathetic, but I feel like it didn't seem like there was, at least from the stats that were shared, that there was like this strong demand, like, hey, we need to fix something. Most people are kind of happy with the outcomes of the elections and the process. And, it didn't seem like something where, there's really this impetus for us to participate and try to fix it. And so I think last time we kind of came to the conclusion of, well, let's let some other cities do it first, see how it goes. And I guess I'm kind of still of that same opinion. I do see some value in it. I kind of look at it like apple pie, like everybody wants banana cream, or their favorite pie is like banana cream or pecan or something. But you ask them their second favorite, they'll probably say apple. Everybody likes apple. So you kind of get that. With RCV, you get more people who are moderately happy with the outcome, as opposed to maybe a smaller majority who are really happy with the outcome. So you would tend to think that would make for a more satisfied voters overall. And then also probably tend to maybe get more moderate candidates, So I get the point of it. Specific to Provo right now, I'm not sure it's the right thing, but so I kind of just said the same thing I said like a year or two ago. I think it's just, let's see others do it first and be successful and want to keep it going, other than just like Vineyard and yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Thank you. Councilor Fillmore.
Yeah, I think I share Councilman Harding's ambivalence about this. What is the problem we're trying to fix, Michael? I mean, is this a solution in search of a problem? I mean, what is wrong with Provo's elections right now that we're so concerned about that we would turn our election system upside down?
Well, currently, this was just brought by Councilor Handley at this, so I would defer to him on that question.
Councilor Handley.
Come on, Michael. Can you go back to the pro screen for a second? I mean, I think it's true. I don't think our situation is dire, but we have had some very extreme candidates run very recently for office that made me very nervous. I think our participation level is very low. It is everywhere. And this has been shown in many cases to increase voter turnout. It tends to increase more dialogue about the issues rather than appealing to, partisan language, frankly, that I don't think is appropriate in the city. Ought to be looking at character. I think they ought to be looking at thoughtfulness and approaches to specific issues. I don't personally see anything wrong with more candidates running. I think that actually gives us a healthier, robust sense of democracy. So the fact that we have some races where no one runs except the incumbent. I think that's a problem, and I was one of them. So I was a beneficiary of that, but I didn't like it. I don't think that's healthy for our community. So I part of it is more contextual in the sense that our culture is increasingly polarized and partisan. And I think we have seen plenty of that in our city. And I would prefer to be proactive in tamping it down so that we really keep a healthy focus on positive campaigns, substantive campaigns, and diverse perspectives to bring to bear to see what the best ideas are that come to the surface. I'm a firm believer that when the majority of a good society picks something, it tends to be the right thing. The problem is 20-something% of our city is voting. So no one represents a majority on this stand. And I think that anything we can do to help improve that would be good. And I think this is a promising way to do it. So those are the reasons why I thought it was, and I wanted to hear what we had said 2 years ago. We were going to wait and see what other cities' experiences have been. And I think we have, if the majority will of the council is to wait another year to get more data, I suppose that's the way to go. But it seems like we've already got pretty strong indications that there aren't any serious red flags. There aren't any serious problems that we've heard about. And so it looks very promising to me. And I thought it was worth exploring again.
So Michael, that's your answer?
That is my answer, yes.
Okay.
Councillor Whipple.
Yeah, and so when you're looking at reduced cost due to no primary, I believe we're mostly looking at it from the city point of view, but from a candidate point of view, that's also a cost savings to not have to do the primary and then gear up for the election. But it's not just money, it's your time. Councillor McKay and I just had to do this whole campaign thing where we walked around and talked to everybody. And because we had primaries, we were doing that in the spring and throughout the summer. And it would have been nice to have some of that time back to be with our families. And a lot of people choose not to run because they know they can't commit that much time, at least 6 months worth of their lives to campaigning. So not only would this potentially encourage candidates to run a positive campaign, but it could encourage more people from different backgrounds, different family situations to be able to run, because it reduces the time that you're doing that really intense campaigning.
So you don't really see any value in the preliminary vetting that a primary represents. It's a winnowing process so that we have a more simplified choice in the fall. Rather have a free-for-all in November with 12+ candidates, which puts an educational load on the average citizen that they're not in any way used to.
Yeah, so on that, for most of our council seats, there aren't that many candidates. We certainly get more in the mayoral race, more people who pop up and think that it would be fun to do that. And some of them, it seems like they're doing it on a lark. They're not necessarily serious candidates. And I believe that this process would winnow them out pretty effectively. I'm not worried that they would rise to the top of this. For my campaign, it was me, it was another gentleman who's also incredibly qualified, and it was a college student who was running for the experience of running so he could put it on his resume as he works with these things. And because that third person, or there were 3 of us running, we had to have a primary, even though it ended up being inefficient, and the 2 candidates that we knew would actually be real candidates were the ones who ended up in the fall election. So to have skipped that primary and still give the student the experience of campaigning and everything, I think would have been good, and it would have been better for all of us.
Although the primary did give you the option to meet more people, right? To expand your influence, your knowledge base of your district. meet more people potentially than you would crammed into a ninth inning October, November effort.
And that's a good point, is I probably would have been walking the whole time anyway, right?
Or
From the beginning. And if a candidate wanted to use that time starting in, March or June after the filing, then they could do that. And I mean, I clearly walked myself into a foot surgery. So people will do that. And the ones who do put in that time will certainly benefit from it.
Well, I'm trying to figure out why, I suppose we don't have any real data one way or the other. I think we're sort of imagining different scenarios that might work well or where it might not work well. I'm just not entirely confident that you can eliminate in a primary and I'm just going to be frank, a dangerous candidate or somebody who's really kind of reckless with the system and isn't really, and that has happened. So that's why I feel more careful vetting in this way. This is the final vetting, obviously, rather than a preliminary one, but it is much stronger of a system. I mean, if you don't have an incumbent and you have lots of people who are running, and like most city elections, people are going to say, I don't know who these people are, or I happen to know this person and I like this person, or I happen to know this person and I don't like this person. But that to me, without a ranked choice voting system, is a potential for disaster, where you could have candidates running who don't get properly screened in the process that a ranked choice voting system would do, and they could get through and they could be the winner because there's two strong candidates running against each other that are drawing away, splitting the vote between them, and then you have this third person who ends up winning with nowhere close to a majority of a voting population that also is nowhere close to the majority. And so essentially you have a few thousand people electing the next mayor or the next city council member. So that's what worries me.
I'm guessing that there are poli-sci courses all over the country debating pros and cons on this. My concern is what Travis has indicated earlier. I'd like a lot more data. I'd like other cities to be the guinea pig and truly evaluate this before we leap into it. Just kind of spitballing. I wonder what, George, your concern is getting rid of, call them dangerous or extreme candidates. I wonder how it would work if you had a primary where you did ranked choice voting in the primary, but not in the final election.
Well, that is something I'm open to. And that may be the one.
The concern I have is if
Yeah.
you just go to a general election, let's say you've got a dozen candidates for a seat. That's extreme, I don't know. But they're all saying, golly, this ranked choice voting gives everybody a chance. If I can strike lightning in a bottle. The educational requirements for the voters go up exponentially.
Well, but I think actually you're mischaracterizing ranked choice voting in that scenario. I actually think the chances of the person who just throws their hat in the ring of getting somewhere is even less under a ranked choice voting scenario.
I'm not talking about I'm sorry. We're just having a friendly discussion here. I hope that's okay, Chairman. But what I'm getting at is not, the casual candidate. I'm getting at the sheer numbers. Let's say you had a dozen serious candidates, and this is, I'm sure, an extreme example. If I'm a voter, my burden now is to really study out all 12 of them and try to somehow calibrate which one is my first, second, third, and fourth. If I understand it correctly, I don't have to rank all 12. I can just pick my top 4 or something, right?
Yeah, you don't have to, you can rank as many as you like, but ranking less than the total number has the potential for your your ballot to be exhausted and not counted in the final
Exactly. I
one.
understand that, but I mean, I'm just talking about the educational load that's required. If I'm really a conscientious voter, or if I'm afraid of some of these other candidates, it's a horrible burden to put on, one round only process. Seems to me if the ranked choice voting would have more value, primary could winnow away the casual or the dangerous candidates. But it also has the possibility if you do ranked choice voting, you end up in many races with a candidate that nobody's really happy about. We settled for somebody, and I'm not sure that's a great thing for democracy. So,
Is there anyone else? Shipley?
So I think I'm conflicted on this enough to not be supportive in the near term of moving forward. But one of the things, as I've read these different articles and read some other articles about Sandy specifically, that was one that I was paying extra close attention to because the population there is a little more similar to ours. I think they had 8 candidates for mayor. I go to Sandy quite a bit. I've got family there. I had sign exhaustion from that mayoral election, and they didn't all have signs. There was only 4 or 5 of them, but the cycle was extended for them longer because anyway. If there was a way to balance that somehow and not have 8 mayoral candidates for months and months that all have have signage. Anyway, that was off-putting to me. And I don't know that the result was them saying, hey, that was a great, so I think we have a mixed bag of different cities saying, yes, it was okay to operate, but it's not necessarily what we wanted. The result wasn't what we wanted. The process wasn't great. So I see enough of that feedback from the cities that have done it outside of the 2 that started here. I think they've been pretty positive and generally positive, but this last round I've seen mixed feedback. Administering it has been, in most cases, okay, right? I mean, we've had pretty positive feedback on administering it, but even Swenson and Salt Lake, I think, said that they grossly underestimated the cost of having lots of extra people on the ballot. So there's some of that going on as well. So the cost thing doesn't seem as clear to me as I'd like it to be. If it was just about cost and skipping a primary, maybe I'd be more supportive, but it doesn't seem like that's a slam dunk either. If we got more participation, both from candidates and from voter participation, if that was significant, if that was a material difference with the folks that participated this last time, I think that would be that'd be a really strong argument. I don't know that we have that data that's really clear in that direction, that shows that there were a lot more both individuals participating other than Sandy, offhand, that my one example and bad examples seem to have more. But I don't know that across the board we saw a generally more people participating, both from a voting standpoint and a candidate position standpoint. So without that data, that would be the strongest thing for it in my mind. I don't see that clearly. And then again, and this is just one off, but having, and the mayor's race from a few years ago with a lot of different candidates is kind of an example of this too. I wish there was a way to not have to have the sign situation that happens, with some of these elections where you have, I'd like more people to choose from, but I don't like the idea of wallpapering the city with, 10 different candidates for months and months and months. So.
Okay. I want to recognize Councilor Ellsworth has joined us. I have a few thoughts about this. Number one, I kind of go back to, if it's not broken, why change it? I think people understand what's happening. They're generally happy with elections. And I think it's why put the time and money into something that doesn't need to be fixed per se. Sandy did get more people initially doing the returning ballots, but they had more thrown out in the end that actually created lower voter turnout than initially. So that wasn't a plus in the end. The cycle is a lot longer. I think it would be a lot more expensive for candidates. It'd be a lot more expensive to try to distinguish yourself and send out more information. And I think it would be longer for everybody, which would really, the difference between what I spent in my primary to what I spent over the whole election, and I think everyone would be having to spend around that whole election price is ridiculous. the dialogue. I worry that you wouldn't have more dialogue with so many people. Multiple articles that we read talked about how it was really hard to do. What are they called? All meet and talk. Debates were really hard to do, and there was too many people and they couldn't organize them, and they actually had less debates and public engagement like that. The voter number, address that. Cost, I'm not sold on the cost improvement either. Like that there's no specific numbers, and everyone's like, oh, it was a lot more than I thought, and everyone's acknowledged it was more than they thought. I think the only reason a lot of people did it was for the cost benefit. And then they were like, oh, bummer, that didn't turn out quite like we wanted. So mainly just go back to there's also that segment of the population that is concerned about elections. And I don't want to do anything I don't want to have the perception that we're changing elections, or that they're more complicated, or that they're less transparent, or that their vote doesn't matter, or, I just don't want to feed into that language or that scenario at all. And again, we're not having a problem, we're fixing. Why add that? Anyone else have any comments? Counselor Whipple.
So I do like your statement that we should all have confidence in our election system, and we don't want to do anything that would signal that there's reason to not be confident in it. I appreciate that, because our elections officials do a fantastic job. And I think they do a great job with the current system. If we were to do a ranked choice voting, I have full confidence they would do a great job with that as well. But I do agree that where we have a public that will take a little bit of negative thing and maybe blow it up or misunderstand it, we don't want to do anything that would decrease confidence.
Thank you. Any other? Counselor Hoban?
Well, I was just going to say, we either need a motion or we just kind of move on to the next item, right?
I don't see the votes for moving on, so I'm assuming we'll just leave it as is. Although I would request that we keep an eye on this and get the data rather than speculate on some of these things. So hopefully maybe next year we'll have more information.
So should we make a motion? Make a motion or not? Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Michael. Next, a discussion regarding micromobility devices. And this will be presented by Brian Jones, the city attorney.
Actually, one of our assistant city attorneys, Mary Ditto, is going to present.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I am not sure how to get you the PowerPoint. Do I?
I
can just
emailed
forward
it
an
earlier
email.
to Malia and
Okay.
Elizabeth. Did you get it?
No problem. I can re-email it too if needs be. Perfect.
Mary, while you're waiting for that to come up, would you introduce yourself? I don't think most of the council has met you before.
Sure, absolutely. I am one of the newest members to the legal team. So I joined the Provo City Attorney's Office in July, and I'm glad to be here. And I've worked about 6 years in the courts, has been my most extensive. So I'm excited to be here in Provo, and it's been a great 6 months. It's a great department and a great city. What we want to focus on today is a code change to section 932-170. This section addresses all of the devices like scooters, e-riders, skateboarders, roller skaters, bicycles, segways, anything in that area. As you no doubt have noticed, they're numerous. But we wanted to discuss some potential changes to our code regarding those devices. Do this. All right. This is how the current code reads. There's 3 sections, so it's fairly straightforward and simple. And in some ways, the last time it was amended was 1999. The first section addresses protective material for the riders, particularly after dark. The second section discusses making it unlawful to ride or use the devices on sidewalks, steps, ramps adjacent to the Provo City Library. And the third section addresses that it will be unlawful to use these devices on private property if they would post signs and choose to prohibit them on that. We wanted to discuss, kind of analyze what the current issues are with the code and why we're recommending a change. As stated, the first section does require safety equipment, but it's for an outdated list of platforms. There's been so many others since 1999 come along and that are currently used. The second one, the prohibition near the library, is potentially overbroad and it is just limited to the library. The third one is that the next issue is it doesn't address the city's new e-rider program. So recently, a few months ago, we entered into a contract with the Bird Company, and that was part of this council's decisions regarding limiting the amount of renters and things like that in the city. So we just have one exclusive company that rents through Provo, and that is the Bird Company at this time. And we would like to include something in our code that makes room for that. It doesn't address parking. So Developmental Services in particular has mentioned the concern that parking on our sidewalks, getting in the way of pedestrians, as well as crosswalks, walkways and things, that isn't ever mentioned in the code. The last issue regarding private properties. So the last section is it's an all or nothing. And so they can prohibit it on their property, but they can't regulate it. Meaning some private property owners want to permit it in certain areas, but not in other areas, or regulate the speed. You're allowed to use them, but only going 10 miles an hour or whatever they would prefer on that. And some property owners may be more willing to allow that if they could regulate the safety concerns. And then regulating speed is a concern. The average top speed is 26 miles per hour, and some models are capable of 75 miles per hour. You can see on the right-hand side, the measured top speed of some of these there's quite an extreme example. And most of those I hadn't even heard of actually. So that's the amount of devices we're dealing with. The suggested changes that we're recommending regarding this code is to expand the definition and safety regulations to explicitly include additional platforms. So to make sure we're including the right things and to make it clear we don't mean motorcycles or golf carts or motorbikes. We're talking scooters and bikes and segways and rollerblades, and to make that language clear. We recommend removing the library in the specific provision, but as we'll discuss, we could still allow the library to post its regulations as far as whatever they feel is most appropriate, or we as a city feel is most appropriate for their walkways. Explicitly reference the exclusive city e-rider program. Recognizing that we have a contract or have the ability to make a contract with a company so that we can limit the renters in our city, the amount of companies. The last is the second to last, prohibit parking that blocks sideways or lanes of travel as discussed. And then the last is allowing property owners, including the city and therefore the library. We're not trying to exclude the library, just a matter of making it, providing more options for private owners and for the city to post regulations such as maximum speed and make it unlawful to violate those regulations. And those who violate those regulations could be cited just as those who ride where it is prohibited.
Okay, Councillor Handley has a question.
Yes.
Could I ask a question about the idea of an exclusive city e-rider program? In such a case, could you stipulate that we will only rent to vehicles that have a maximum speed of 25 miles an hour or something like that?
We currently have a contract with the Bird right now is the current company. And so we could include that in the contract. We don't necessarily recommend including it in the code because which is such a broad city, right? I mean, there's so many different situations and things like that. But we could include that in the contract. It would probably be more flexible that way.
And then presumably we would be saying things like, I mean, what worries me is well, among other things, I mean, I'm an e-bike user, so
Sure.
but I try to behave like I should. And one of the things I don't do is fly down sidewalks, right? Which is extremely dangerous. Even at moderate speeds, it's very dangerous. And yet I see people using all kinds of devices going quite fast on sidewalks. So we would have some program, we would have something in our own code that would say we could cite somebody for being too fast, but also being in the wrong. I don't know. I don't know if you can categorically exclude sidewalks, but because if somebody's trying to like come up onto something,
Sure.
maybe, but if they're going at a speed that's higher than 10 miles an hour on a sidewalk, it seems very dangerous.
I
Yeah.
think-
Yes.
Does Brian want to say something?
Well, I was just gonna say, it's been a while since I looked, so I don't remember exactly. The scooters, I think, are already banned by city code from sidewalks, and bicycles are as well on certain streets, but I don't think they are everywhere. But that's something we could look at.
Are you done?
Oh, yes. I just want, if there's any questions.
Okay, great. Any questions from?
Oh,
councilors?
yes.
Okay, Counselor Fillmore.
It's Mary, right?
Yes.
Okay, Mary, welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to have you on board. What are we calling these? Micromobility devices,
Yes.
MMDs. So this seems to me to be an inexorable tide. Going to see more and more of these. Now, for lots of reasons, right? It's mobility, and they're relatively clean transportation devices. And so they're certainly not going away. We're probably going to see more of them. Seems like we're entering a thicket that could be extremely complicated. You know, what devices can go on a sidewalk and what can't, where can they go? We're going to multiply signage, right? Particularly private property. In this particular place, the private property owner says 10 miles an hour. So that's one more sign if you see it. And I just see that the complexity is mounting here. And I wonder if there's an instinctive desire on your part as you draft an ordinance for us to look at to try to simplify and generalize as much as possible, because we're going to have, I just think, a lot of confusion, not to mention senior citizens run over.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, trying to simplify as much as possible. Agreed, but provide those options. It doesn't necessarily always have to be through a sign, but some notice given. If we're concerned about signs, we could emphasize that, but the proper notice given, we could determine as well. But yes.
Well, I predict you're going to have flashing signs on some private properties.
Yes.
No MMDs here or whatever.
Sure.
And then the policing the parking issue. I mean, as these multiply, it becomes another enforcement issue, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I think it would depend on how much, the city wanted to invest in something like enforcing something like that. But having it in the code does make it an option to enforce as needed. So.
Yeah, so I'm not speaking out against these MMDs.
Sure.
I'm just saying that I just see lots of problems.
Yes.
They're going to have to be addressed. And
Yeah. Anyone else? Counselor Ellsworth.
Are there any provisions in our code or any that are proposed that would prohibit or reduce the use of micromobility around schools?
Currently, the code in the third section, it does cite that schools or private property owners can prohibit. The change we're recommending is simply that they can regulate, right? So they can choose to allow it, but at a certain speed, or and just because an outright ban doesn't provide as many options for private owners. And so, but schools are currently in there right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking if at an elementary school, when kids get out at 3:30, if there's like 25 scooters or different little
Yeah.
things running around and they're all moving at 9 miles an hour, it just sounds like
Herd of turtles.
a collision course, right? So would this mean that we're leaving it to the school district to regulate around schools?
That is a good question. Is it the school? Brian, do you happen to know how that's currently? in
Well,
place?
it'd be up to the private property owner to make a decision, right? I mean, they're already making a decision. Right now, the decision is ban or allow, right? The proposal would be they can now make a decision to ban or allow with no conditions or allow with conditions. So they're just having one more option, whoever the property owner is. And I guess while I have the microphone, I'd also mention that one of the biggest private property owners in the city is obviously BYU, and we have had some conversations with them about how this might apply. They currently ban them. We've had some conversations with them about how this might open up options for them. And Steve Sandberg from BYU's legal counsel is present. I don't know that he wanted to say anything, but he indicated he'd be happy to answer questions if you have questions for him.
I'm more interested in the inputs of the school district and the children that are underage that could be impacted by this. And does the school district have the ability to regulate micromobility in and around their property? Certainly in their property it does, but what about across the street? Like, what's the proximity of regulation that they might have?
So again, right now, their options are allow or ban on their property. The only thing that's being proposed is allow or ban or regulate on their property.
Okay. Have they been involved in this process?
No.
Okay. Yeah, it would be great to get their feedback, see if there's anything else they would add.
Counselor Fillmore, please.
Mary, a couple
Yes.
more if I might.
Sure.
Maybe one of these ought to be answered by Mr. Sandberg, but I have a grandson who rides his electric scooter all the way from the south side of town to campus now. Are we saying that would be banned or just banning the travel on campus from building to building? Not to get to the school, would it?
So it's currently banned on campus right now.
So you could ride your scooter several miles to the campus if there was a place to put your scooter, which would eliminate traffic, right, and minimize air pollution. You're saying you don't want people racing around on campus, knocking down co-eds.
That'd be a good thing. After the death at San Jose State, we took really seriously the idea of having people like your grandson who rides a micromobility device to campus to have the option to ride on campus. We'd like to offer that. We'd also like to be the ability that if we offer that, we can then crack down on people who ride them unsafely through campus at too high a rate of speed or too near other people. Right now, we don't have that opportunity. So if we were to allow all the devices on campus right now, which is the binary option the code allows, then we have no ability to make sure that's done safely on campus.
So you'd like campus police to be able to cite unsafe riders?
Correct.
Okay.
And what we're still thinking this through on campus too. A lot of people ride them near campus, so it's completely up to these individuals to buy their own scooter or e-bike and ride them in the city areas where they're available to ride. And then when they get to campus, some people ride their bikes like an e-bike responsibly, and we allow for shared lanes on campus so they can ride around on our campus roads. It's unclear. Right now, we have people get off their bikes and walk during class breaks. That's one thing we think about. That's a time when a lot of our sidewalks are really, really packed. Mm-hmm. But in the after hours, like 7 o'clock, if someone is on the south end of campus and it's easier for them to ride through campus to go back home, right now they can do that if they have a bicycle. But if they have a scooter, they can't, because we've elected to ban those because we do have a lot of people who ride or would ride these things unsafely if we didn't have an ability to set up a structure of safety and enforcement.
It gets complicated. So do you draw a line between motorized and non-motorized? For example, skateboards on campus.
Skateboards we banned for a long time.
Okay.
This would actually allow us to go back to allowing people to ride skateboards. One thing we've thought about is just when you're on campus sidewalks, our rule of thumb might be something like a fast walking speed. So if someone had a skateboard, they could now to roll through campus again. We've put in other places. The reason we banned skateboards, one of the reasons we did in the past, was a lot of people would use them and tear up our railings. But a lot of our design lately has been to put the types of things on our railings or on our cement that makes it so that it's not like the city does actually in some areas, except for at skate parks, to discourage that kind of use. So it's looking at mobility in ways that where we are in 2023 is far different from 1999.
And trying to eliminate.
We're not worried about rollerblades coming back in mass, though. We're not really worried about that.
You probably also want to eliminate turning certain parts of the campus into de facto skate parks.
Correct. We have other ways to regulate that. What we're looking for is the ability for people to get places reasonable ways and to do it safely.
Next question for you and Mary, and that's the liability issue. And I mean, our country, each state has all kinds of laws governing safe use of automobiles, right?
Sure.
And we have an entire insurance regime, to make it a safer world. I don't suppose anybody has proposed insurance requirements for motorized devices, have they?
Not at this time. No. Our focus has been more on what can we do, kind of like you were talking about simply, right? Like what can we do? What are some smaller steps that we can take that would allow greater safety, in some way regulation as well, for these particular types of devices?
So right now, if you have a scooter accident where somebody riding a device seriously harms somebody that got in their way on a sidewalk, we're just looking at standard tort principles to sort out fault.
Yes. Yeah, it would be tort principles. Often the person injured is the rider, right? It seems like in the cases that I've seen. But yes, if they injure someone else, then it would be tort liability.
So would
civil.
Comparative negligence apply to this kind of an accident?
I have not
Since it's outside the auto realm?
I haven't seen it. I mean, there's, never underestimate the creativity of a plaintiff's attorney at all, or attorneys in general. But like, I haven't seen that as much. I don't know if Brian, or have you seen any of that comparative negligence in the same way? But okay. Yes, state law as far as.
Thank you, Mary.
Yeah.
Counselor Handley has a question.
Sure.
Yeah, this is for Mr. Sandberg. First of all, a confession. I've been riding on campus with my e-bike for about 5 years, and I've always, well, it's actually a proud confession. I've always made sure that I never went faster than, I think fast walk maybe is maybe a little faster than that. But anyway, not during the changeover hours, because I never wanted to punish other e-bike riders by misbehaving. So I'm totally with the university on this. I guess what I hear you saying is that if you had the tools, this would increase the capacity of students to use alternative modes of transportation other than cars to get to campus. Is
Yes.
that accurate?
That's accurate.
Because it seems to me that there's a pretty serious disincentive when you can't actually use it on the campus. So I like that a lot. I think we should do everything we can to help you. One related issue, and this is both for you and for the mayor, but it's helmets. It drives me crazy how few helmets I see on campus and in this city for people going extremely high speeds. And I'm wondering if, I don't know if it's a cultural change that just, I don't know, where I went to school in California, it was, you were practically shamed off of the campus if you showed up without a helmet. It was that kind of a culture that I wish we had, that just made it a safer place. And I don't know what the solution to that is, if it's something we can I don't know if it's something we can legislate, but if it is, I'm willing to do it. But if I'd prefer it to be the culture that this is, wear your bucket. It's the best way to go.
The mayor has a
So
comment.
George, you just shame away. You can do all the shaming you want and it will help hopefully, but it is a state legislative issue. We don't have say so over it. The state does. So if you want to go to bat on it, go to bat. They're in session right now, by the way.
I heard that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions for Mary or Mr. Sandberg? Counselor Whipple.
Thank you. With this, because it would be a broader ordinance involving all property owners being able to set regulations that would determine where or how these devices could be used on their property. Not all property owners have their own mini police force to regulate that. And so my concern would be how citations or how it would be enforced on private properties that aren't BYU. So if the hospital wanted to set up its own rules, or the mall that says, yeah, you can ride your things here, but you can only go 10 miles an hour. What would the enforcement look like on that? And what are we looking at for the legislation to address that?
It would be this similar process. Like it could go through the city as far as enforcement goes. And Brian, I don't know, maybe you can speak to this as far as the.
Well, I'll just say, I don't think it only changes things to the extent that you assume that there are private property owners that don't currently ban the use, but will in the future regulate the use. Because otherwise the enforcement is the same as the ban, right? I mean, I don't know whether they do or not, but if UVRMC currently bans the use on their campus, then it's the same issue. They'd have to call a Provo police officer. Provo police officer would respond in time. And probably, I mean, enforcement would be hard. Enforcement's gonna be really hard, right? But it gives options that not having the regulation is away.
Thank you. All right, we are over time. I think we're good, Mary.
Okay,
Thank you so
great.
much. Okay, the next agenda item, a discussion regarding council assignments to committees, boards, and commissions. And this will be presented by Justin Harrison, the council executive director.
Good afternoon, council. Hopefully we'll make up a little time on this one. It should be fairly short. You should see in front of you in just a minute the list of council committee assignments. These are typically assigned in even number of years following municipal elections. It's been the standard practice of the council to relook at these again a year after to see if there are any adjustments that need to be made. I sent this out and distributed the current council assignments with leadership updates and updates to the redevelopment agency to the council, and just received indication from one council member that there is a board that they are no longer able to serve on due to time limitations and constraints, and that was the library board for Councilor Shipley. There was a willing participant to accept that, and I wonder if Councilor Ellsworth is still willing to serve on the library board.
Yes, I'm willing, but I don't
Okay.
want to take the privilege from anyone else who's dying to have it.
So does that require a vote? Do we do
No,
anything
the-
official or? we're good?
So because this is a city board with a council appointment, the name would be submitted to the mayor. It would come back to the council for council consent. So
Great.
I didn't hear back from many others on any other limitations or changes that needed to be made on any boards, but wanted to give a final opportunity if there are any needs for changes. We can run through these in their entirety if you'd like, or
I think does anyone feel like we need to go through them? I personally don't.
Well, I have a question for Councilor McKay. I'm a little worried you're stretched out very thin and you just took on leadership of the council, and I don't know if, anyway.
I feel good with it. I've done the past year, and so I know the exact time commitment. But I am also, if I get in trouble and I'm drowning, I will ask for help.
Okay. I'd be happy to help out with my arts council or Parks and Rec or something like that if you're feeling stretched.
Thank you.
All right. Perfect. With that direction, we'll submit that name to the mayor and come back to you at our next meeting, hopefully for your consent on that appointment.
Great. Thank you, Justin.
Thanks so much.
A closed session has been requested. Utah Code Section 524205 allows meetings to be closed for certain specific reasons. Brian Jones, the city attorney, will be presenting that closed meeting, and I need a motion to close the meeting, please.
Thank you, Chair McKay. So in preparation for that motion, one of the reasons that we're allowed to have closed meetings is for when the city is anticipating purchasing property. There's a topic that the administration would like to present to the council in that regard, so it would be appropriate. Just the meeting.
Thank you.
I'll make that motion.
I will second that.
Great. I will take now, do I need to do the?
Is there
ask
any
for a
discussion?
verbal- It asks for a verbal roll call. So Counselor Hoban,
Yes.
Counselor Ellsworth,
Yes.
Counselor Hanley,
Yes.
Counselor Whipple.
Yes.
Counselor McKay will vote yes. Counselor Shipley,
Yes.
Counselor Fillmore,
Yes.
and we will close this meeting and start the closed meeting. And I will announce that the vote is unanimous. Thank you.
Record.